Okay, so I wanted to also make a quick video about just what are each of the functions, and I'm going to try and sum them up as quick as I can and as best as I can. Okay, so there are 16 types, and there are 8 functions. There are 4 categories of either feeling, thinking, sensing, or intuiting. Each of these 4 have different orientations. They can either be introverted or extroverted. I like to think of extroverted as being synonymous with breadth, and introverted as being depth. So each function, I like to think of there being a tree, and then there being an equal root to that tree. Every introverted function is the root, and every extroverted is the tree. So if you wanted to talk about intuition, extroverted intuition is the tree that there is an equal and opposite introverted intuition root that is connected to it. So each person, each type has 4 functions that they use. As an ENFJ, I use extroverted feeling, introverted intuition, extroverted sensing, and introverted thinking. Now, as an ENFJ, I express my feelings through this tree, this breadth. Sorry, I can't talk. But that's not to say, like, I don't pay attention to my root, but that's not to say it doesn't exist. A lot of FI users like to say that FE is fake because they don't sense this root. But we just don't talk about the root. We don't feel the root as much. Now, for introverted intuition, we have a harder time letting our intuition out into the open. It doesn't bloom as much, you could say. But we feel it very deeply. So each function is like this, and I think this is the simplest way to describe it. I've mentioned before, but ENFJs are really good at making complicated things seem simple. And that was, I guess, the simplest way I could describe it. But obviously there's more complexities to that. So I'm going to start with feeling first, since I'm a feeler first. Extroverted feeling expresses their emotions. Now, think about what does it even mean to feel. To be a feeler does not mean that you are not logical. It just means that you, okay, so feeling and thinking. Thinking tries to be impersonal, and feeling does not. Feeling is value-based. Thinking is logic-based, but the two go hand in hand. Every feeler also thinks. Every thinker also feels. Every sensor also intuits, and vice versa. Everyone can do it all. That's one thing to remember. But extroverted feeling is, okay, also, extroverted also is objective, while introverted is subjective. So, because if something is inside you, then that is subjective. It is in relation to you, while extroverted is objective in relation to the world and the external world. So, an extroverted feeler feels objectively, while an introverted feeler feels subjectively. Now, something to remember about the functions is that every feeler also thinks in the opposite orientation. So there's not someone that's going to have a completely subjective judging function, because with my FE, I make up for it with my introverted thinking that's subjective. So everyone has both. So extroverted feelers, they express their emotions outwardly. That's how they deal with them. They compare their own emotions to the external world. It's really all about communication. And introverted feelers, they have this sort of gut feeling. They know if they like something or if they don't like something pretty quickly based on their values. Extroverted feelers like to okay, if anyone's ever heard of utilitarianism, I think that's a great way to think about extroverted feeling. Extroverted feeling thinks, okay, well, what good will this cause? What good will this action cause? What feeling will this action cause? Introverted feelers just know what is good and what is bad based on their value system. Extroverted feelers ask themselves, this action is only as good as its product. If me talking to my friend when they're sad is going to cheer them up, then that's a good action. If I am going to talk to my friend to cheer them up, but they want to be alone, then it's not a good action. Extroverted feelers' actions are very much dependent on the result. TE is like this too. So moving on to TE versus TI. Extroverted thinking is concerned with, will it work? Introverted thinking is concerned with, is this consistent logic? Now, I'm an introverted thinker. Introverted thinkers like to compile as much information as they can, and they try and find the truth that is in all of that. While an extroverted thinker would just kind of pick up an object and be like, what can it do? What product will this create? And, yeah. I don't know, it's just, I'm trying not to get too detailed here, even though I do know more details, because I just want to get through this. But if you just think about the words objective and breadth, and versus subjective and depth, that's just huge. Because extroverted feelers, they feel more of people's pain. They're able to empathize more with more people, a more variety of emotions. Introverted feelers are able to empathize deeper. So it's not one better than the other, they're just two different things. And introverted thinkers know, like, have this sort of intense knowing about what is true, while extroverted thinkers are able to just do more things. So, okay, moving on to perceiving functions. Intuition. So extroverted intuition, I like to think of these people as they want to know what if. They're able to come up with every possibility. Introverted intuition is better at judging which possibility is more likely, because they know more about, they have a deeper knowing of what it is. Introverted intuitives like to look at the world and find this sort of common ground and bring it all in together. Well, extroverted intuition, they see things and then it makes them branch off into many more directions. NI users are concerned with a path. NE users, they don't want there to be just one path. They want to not be tied down by that. I find that NE users, they get their inspiration from walking around, moving around, talking to people. And introverted intuitives, they are more likely to meditate and sort of just introspect on what it is that they should do. Introverted intuitives get this sort of gut feeling, insight, like a flash of insight. They don't know where it came from, Bob. Extroverted intuitives, I feel like they're constantly picking up puzzle pieces, and this insight takes a longer. I don't know if NI users, their insight is just it's more subconsciously building, and then it all hits them once it reaches the surface. But NE users, it seems like they take longer to get to this understanding because they just have these puzzle pieces, and until they are able to make a picture, it could be anything. They kind of live in this world where anything could happen, man. Like, and NJs or NI users don't like that. They yeah. So SE versus SI. Extroverted sensing is just it's so basic. It's just looking out there and putting yourself in the zone, if you will. Introverted sensing is all the details. Introverted sensing is the puzzle pieces that NE uses to see this big picture. Introverted sensing is very detail focused, and honestly, the one function that I don't really quite understand, because As an ENFJ, I have none of it. But introverted sensing is focused on the past. They are focused on patterns continuing. Extroverted sensing is alert and is ready for the pattern to change at any moment. Another analogy I like to think is if you are looking at a cup, an introverted sensor would be like the cup is 3 inches wide and this many inches, and they'll think about that sort of stuff. And extroverted sensors would be like, it's a cup, okay? It's just a cup. Introverted intuitives would be like, it's a cup that could be filled with water, which we drink from, which helps us in society. And it's made of styrofoam, which will cause pollution. Extroverted intuitives would be like, it could be a hat, it could be this, it could be used for that, it could be this. I don't even know how they come up with these things. But yeah, that's a good example. So those are the functions. Just think subjective versus objective. And that's just huge because every extrovert, whether their main function is F, E, T, E, N, E, or S, E, they need to engage with the external world in order to process. I'm a little bit jealous of introverts that they don't need to do this, but obviously everyone does, to an extent. Introverted functions need quiet in order to process, and extroverted functions need to work its way out. F, E, and T, E, they need the help of either NI or SI to predict what will happen and see which results they like, which results are more preferred. Well, FI and TI, out of everything they've observed from either SE or NE, anything that they've ever observed is just always going, it's always being stored. And FI and TI is the quickest to judge if there's something in the external world that doesn't fit with that. They will know instantly. Either that doesn't make sense or that's not moral. They just know. But they sometimes have a harder time explaining. Extroverted functions have an easier time explaining. Like I know how to explain what I feel and what I think, but I have a hard time explaining. Okay, no, not what I think. I have a good time explaining what I like, how I feel, but with my introverted intuition and introverted thinking, I have a hard time explaining my analysis, which is hard for me because I really enjoy NI and TI, and I'm constantly trying to bring those things to the surface. Well, extroverted intuitives will just seem more intuitive because they're able to talk about these weird things, while introverted intuitives don't. I think it's just a lot. Extroverted functions just, I think it's just easier to connect those. While I feel like introverted functions are just kind of like a hidden gem in people. And yeah, I have a theory which I could talk about later. I'm just going to say now. ENFJs are outwardly feely and sensory because we use FE and SE, but inwardly we feel like NTs because we have introverted intuition and introverted thinking. So outwardly we seem very kind of basic and feely, but inwardly we feel like intuitive geniuses. That's true for every like NFJ and STPs as well. NTPs and SFJs, they outwardly are interestingly, they inwardly, you get the point. I don't think I have to explain each one, but you get the point that your extroverted functions are how the world sees you, and that's difficult whenever your introverted functions are strong as well, because then that side of you has a harder time coming across. So yeah, SFJs, they have an inner ST part of themselves. Yeah. Well, there's what I have to say about functions for now.